Hi class. So if you remember, in the previous videos we were discussing the essay Modernist Drama and Modernist Drama Origins and Patterns. And in the last part, we discussed about how the entire idea of modernism or meta theater is based on two postulates. The first one is that the world is a stage, and the second one is that life is a dream. Right, so the continuation of that will come in the will be repeated in the coming parts, and that's why I wanted to remind you before I started this part. Okay, so part 4 of this essay, it begins this way. Certain indicators trace this meta theatrical aspect of modernism. Okay, so there are some indicators through which we can trace this aspect of modernism. All right, and by exaggerating a little bit, we can almost say that modernist drama is defined by the aesthetics of silence. Okay, now what is silence? In a drama, silence is not something that you would look for, right? You always, when you think of drama, you always think of something that is always active, something or the other is always happening on stage, unless the curtain is being changed and all of that. But sorry, the curtain is down and all of that, but and the set is being changed. But otherwise, when the stage is lit, when the characters are on stage, when the drama is going on, you never think of silences as being essential. Even in films today, okay, you might find that silences are becoming much more common than it was ever before. So that's why our authors here are using this term called the aesthetics of silence to almost define modernist drama. Okay, so they say never before have the fragmentary, low key, the inarticulate, even the incoherent and frankly non verbal tendencies of theatrical intercourse been so audaciously developed. Okay, so never before in drama had silence gained so much momentum. Okay, all these fragmentary dialogues that make no sense, the sounds and the grunts and the just characters just standing around not saying anything without even any background music. You can imagine these serials today, Indian serials, where even though the characters will not be saying anything, there will be very dramatic looks on their faces, and there will be a very great background music, but nothing like that is going on. It's completely silent, no background music, no dialogues. So imagine a drama like that. But in modernist drama, in most modern plays, we see that these silences are developed, and they tend to, rather than being just random silences, they tend to hold greater meanings than the dialogues themselves sometimes. Okay, so how does this happen? Okay, he gives us the example of two plays here, and that is Endgame and Waiting for Godot. All right, in both of these plays, okay, you see how silences come into play. I think you might not be familiar with Endgame, but you must have studied Waiting for Godot at some point, or you must have at least heard of it. What happens is that the characters just stop talking, they sigh, and even the dialogues that they say are mostly meaningless, and suddenly they stop talking, and then Estragon breaks the silence by saying this dialogue that in the meantime nothing happens. Okay, so just like that is what the audience will be thinking at that moment, and that is the same dialogue that Estragon says. Okay, so that is the aesthetics of silence that has been discussed here. So the silences in Strindberg, in Pinter, or in Beckett are justified within the play. Okay, so in the play they are all justified, but they also serve as a reflection. All right, so not only are they justified in the play, where whichever part of the play they come into, they are justified, like they hold some sort of meaning in that sense. Okay, but our authors say that it becomes a reflection of the play itself. That means it reflects the modernist aspect, the meaninglessness, the absurd feelings that modernism is trying to bring about. So it's a reflection upon it also. Right, however, in spite of there being so many silences in Beckett's plays, and the characters almost speaking nonsense most of the time, we see that many of his characters are quite literate in the sense that they usually quote from classics and all of that. Okay, and that shows that they are not using silence or meaningless dialogue because they are dim-witted or having less intelligence, because at the same time they are quoting classics. So it's just showing the modern condition of man through those plays. Okay, so this inarticulacy in words is the medium as much as it is the message. That is the important line here. Okay, so this silence is as much the medium as it is the message. Okay, so whatever it is trying to say, what the medium that is being used is silence. Okay, so silence is a medium, but silence is also a message here. That is what our authors are saying. Okay, so again he gives us the example of another work called The Caretaker. All right, and another play by Ionesco called The Lesson. Okay, but he says that these in these works, the fantasies, the mental breakdowns, everything that is discussed is a play upon language itself. Okay, so language is one thing that is being constantly experimented with by playwrights in the modern period, but it's not something that began in the modern period. That is problematic. When we trace the origins of modernist drama, we see that even people who belonged, or playwrights, sorry, who belonged to earlier periods have used these kinds of tools of distorting language, of using silences in their play. So how then do you define modernist drama? Authors like Pinter and Chekhov, who belong to two different eras completely, they seem to have been using similar styles in their works. So can you call we know that Harold Pinter is a modernist, but can you call Chekhov a modernist too? That is where the confusion comes. Okay, so silences or digressions that are used in plays are better than statements, discursive or explicit statements is what we understand from our experience of watching and reading modernist drama, because as I said, the medium becomes the message. Silence is something that defines the modern condition of man in a much better way than any dialogue can. Moving on to the fifth part of the essay. So this is a characteristically modern concept, right? So this characteristically modernist concept of meta theater and the idea or the motive of life is a dream that we discussed earlier, our authors say, are of unifying importance. All right, why is because of this. Okay, now if life is a dream, all right, where does reality exist? So this difference between reality, what is fictional, what is real, it should be presented on stage, right? How far can you believe what is reality, what is illusion? How do you define that when you're watching a play? Of course. Okay, so here he begins this part by talking about a playwright called Luigi Pirandello. Okay, where there is an ambiguous interrelationship of the fictional and the real, so you can't really make out what is fictional and what is real. Okay, and this sorry, I can't find the word, method, probably for want of a better word. So this method of blending together the fictional and the real was not something that came with Pirandello, but you can find it in works in the work of the playwright called Strindberg's himself, who wrote dream play called Dream Play in 1901, which was you can almost call it pre-modern. All right, and this work was one that had a profound revolutionary originality. Okay, there is another work discussed here that will help you understand this essence of modernism completely, and this is Arthur Adamov's play called Professor Tyranny, okay, which was published in 1951. Here it describes the peril of an academic professor. Okay, he's a professor, he's an academician, and he's very eminent in everything, but suddenly he is he there are a list of offenses that are coming up against him. Okay, from lack of courtesy towards colleagues and friends. Okay, something as trivial as that. Then he is accused of plagiarism. Then he is accused of indecent exposure. Okay, so those the crimes or the offenses against them are increasing in their uh, criminality rather. Okay, so what happens is that throughout this play, this defamation against the professor, we are confused what whether the professor is actually a criminal. Is he the perpetrator of the crime, or is he the victim? Okay, we don't know whether he is being framed for all of these things. We don't know. We can never really describe. Okay, and as the play ends, what happens is that finally we see that this professor, without explaining anything, without saying anything, when the curtain falls, we see that this professor is starting to take off his clothes. So that can either indicate that he is someone who does indecent exposure, one. Okay, second thing that it can indicate is that he's conforming to the truth of being a person who takes off his clothes in public. Or the second thing is that it's a nightmare that's coming true. That means all these cases that are coming up against him, there is no way that he can prove his innocence. That's why he's giving up and giving into that. All right. Or you can even imagine that this entire play sequence of this professor being framed or being given I don't know why I'm unable to find words. Okay, of this professor being criminalized might have been his dream sequence. Okay, so there are three possibilities that the audience can consider after watching this play, and never at any point in the play will the playwright come and tell you that yes, this is the correct answer, or out of these three options, this is the one that is correct. Why? Because it is left to the audience to decide for themselves. So there is a very increasing level of engagement of audience. The audience can differ meanings of their own when they are watching a modernist play, which was not existing in a pre-modernist period. Okay, in pre-modernist period, what happened? The ending of the play will tell you a moral, or will tell you what is all the mysteries will be unraveled. When we study the how a plot moves from the starting point to the climatic point to the conclusion, and then there's a denouement, and by the denouement everything should have all the mysteries that were built up throughout the play, the rising action, it should be resolved, right? But in modernist drama, none of that happens. Okay, so what is reality and what is illusion becomes a question in modernist drama. Okay, and this is the question that modernism is adept at posing, or it is what defines modernism as such. So it is undermining our categories. That means whatever we believe that yes, this is true, this is real, this is fiction, and we had these perfect categories built up, but now all these categories are becoming meaningless. That means we don't know what fits where anymore. Okay, and it is destroying our confidence in familiar things. That means we believe that this is an apple, so this apple should be a fruit. That is something, that is a categorization that is familiar to us. But a playwright will come and tell you that this is not an apple, this is a vegetable, or this is something made of flour. Okay, so then you become confused. Where do I put this apple? Is it a fruit? Is it a vegetable? Is it a grain? I don't know. All right, that is what modernist drama does. Okay, it creates confusion in the mind of the audience of what is real and what is a illusion. We'll continue the next part in the next video.